This is Logical Logistics, where we cover shipping, supply chain, logistics, and everything in between. Welcome to the show. All right, welcome to episode 13 of Logical Logistics, and today's guest is John Tracy. He is a customs broker from TOH International. John, how you doing today?
Good. How are you today?
I am great.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I put out questions to my listeners a few episodes ago, and they are starting to pile up, and we will have our question and answer episode coming up soon. But one of the questions repeatedly comes up is, when are you going to have a customs broker on? And thank you, John, for joining us, because that has been a request that has come over our email frequently. So,
thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. So, John, you work for a company called TH International, correct?
TOH International.
TOH International.
O is an Oscar, H is an Harry. Yes.
All right. Can you give me a little background on yourself and the company?
The company itself has been in business since 1972, and they are a licensed customs broker, meaning we are licensed by the Department of Homeland Security to handle the customs clearance work for importers bringing product into the United States. It was founded by two gentlemen, one in particular who named the company after his own initials, Timothy O'Hannon. I joined the firm in 2003 after being on the import side of things for about 12 or 13 years, working for a company that imported. And I purchased the company in 2004. I've owned it since. Got my license a few years later, and run the day-to-day operations of this little customs brokerage firm.
Okay. So I know a lot of people out there know what a customs broker does, but there are listeners out there that have somewhat of an idea or need a refresher. Can you tell us what exactly a customs broker does?
Certainly, and it's funny, people ask you what you do for a living, and you start to tell them, and after about 30 seconds, their eyes glaze over because they don't understand.
I know how that goes.
Your listeners are switched on and tuned into the industry and the marketplace, and probably have a better understanding of the role we play. Customs brokers work with importing companies. Any company importing product in the United States needs to work with a customs broker. And what the customs broker does is handles the classification and filing with U.S. Customs of the shipment's contents and value. Now, when I say classification, what I mean to say is that Customs has what they've always called is a tariff schedule, whereas every conceivable item you could import into this country would have some sort of harmonized tariff code assigned to it, based on obviously what the commodity is, its use, what it's made of. And attached to those tariff codes is typically a duty percentage or duty rate. And as a broker, it is our job to analyze the documentation that pertains to a given shipment, liaison with the importer to confirm, of course, what it is, how it's used, if there's any ambiguity based on the paperwork we receive, and file the entry with U.S. Customs prior or at the time of the shipment's arrival into the United States. At that point, Customs will review the information, sometimes physically look at it, and physically look at the shipment, that is, and at some point, God willing, if there's no problems, release the shipment. At that point, upon release, then the importer can take possession of his goods and pay the appropriate amount of duties due based on our calculations. We also work with importers in kind of a consulting role. We often have a lot of our day is spent when our importer clients say, "Hey, I'm going to bring in this new widget. This is what it is. This is what it's made of. This is what it does. How would you classify it? What's my duty rate going to be? My percentage?" And a lot of times, obviously, they're importing product and trying to build in their landed cost. So we're a very important element of that.
That's interesting you bring that up, because with so many different startups, I'm sure that's growing part of your business.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, and it's obviously, if you're an importer or a business person, or like you say, a startup, and you're looking at bringing in a product or making a product, you have to analyze what it costs to get it to your door, whether you build it locally or build it overseas. So absolutely, we're a part of that process, and like you say, at a very early point in the process. obviously if someone's trying to analyze whether it's cost efficient to build offshore or build here. So we see that element of the business all the time, and it's interesting to watch because it's like watching a flower grow from a little seedling to a full-size flower or tree, what have you. We see businesses grow that way, and we see their businesses develop that way as they kind of build these relationships.
Okay, so So everyone's contacting you from different companies that actually manufacture to freight forwarders, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes, because we are a licensed custom broker. We are not a freight forwarder. That basically two elements in the importing process. You have to move the freight and you have to clear it. And some folks do both, and some folks do one or the other. And we, as a licensed customs broker, have always just focused on customs brokerage. We don't do freight forwarding, but we do partner with a number of freight forwarders who have us work with their importer clients. So kind of a hand-in-hand approach.
All right. Now, during your description, you touched upon three different things, and I wanted to go into each of those. The types of commodities that you deal with. Mm-hmm. Can you go from the ordinary to the way out there, something that would blow our mind as far as what you've seen?
Well, yeah, we focus on, we do the typical people that bring in screws and metalwork and machinery we do quite a bit of food.
Okay.
We're based in Chicago. Chicago is an ethnic melting pot of peoples, if you will. So there's, a wide ranging demand for foods from outside of this country, and it's a good chunk of our business and something we focus on. And my colleague and partner, who is a customs broker, has a big, extensive background in that. And the most exotic thing is I handled the importation of a panda last month, which
a panda.
Occasions where a panda,
a panda bear. Okay.
From a zoo in Canada to going to a zoo down in actually Greensboro, North Carolina.
Wow.
Chicago is such a central point that it's kind of the center of the wheel, as they say. So much comes through here, either through O'Hare Airport or through the ocean rails. As Chicago has always been that kind of that center of the rail, where east meets west, and it's always been, and God willing, will always continue to be an important transportation hub, and therefore making freight forwarding and customs brokerage a pretty big business in these parts.
So what percentage is ocean? What percentage is air?
Oh, I'd say we're definitely more heavy ocean nowadays.
Okay.
I think companies have gotten much. I'd say we're probably 70-30 ocean to air.
All right.
Say. And part of that's based on our product mix of, that our clients bring in. Certain high value, high demand products would still be air freighted, but it's a dollars and cents things for the importer. It's obviously much more cost effective to ship ocean if you can do it.
Yeah.
And we've just seen that trend, and even though fuel has gone down, obviously air is still considerably more expensive.
So back to the panda bear. You start from. How did this come about? How did you get?
I work with one of my partner clients handles importation of animals.
All right.
So they work with people that are bringing in like dog breeders, and this guy kind of has a real niche that he handles. Like he works with zoos and things like that, where animals bring in, he'll take care of them while they're at the airport or something, and maybe in transit them somewhere, within the Midwest. So he's the one that's the partner I've worked with for some time. That it's been some fun stuff sometimes. It's a cute little animal, although it darn near bit me. I swear to God, when I was ready to bounce out of the cage.
Yeah.
Well, it's tough on the animals to be caged up that long because, in addition to the flight time, obviously, there's considerable time before and after flights when they're kind of caged up.
Sure.
So that's probably my most interesting import.
Pardon me?
That or an octopus. That was brought
wow.
In. Yeah.
So how did the octopus come over?
That was air freighted from Japan.
All right. So it obviously has to be in water, seawater.
It was, yeah. And it's funny, I actually picked the thing up myself at the airport and met the biologist who was bringing it down he was actually out of the University of Iowa at Iowa City and drove in and got it and actually had to take it down to the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. So it was actually in my laundry room for about an hour.
Oh, my word. Yeah.
I cleared it, but yeah, it was fine.
Yeah. University of Iowa, you know it well.
Every day.
I'm a Hawkeye, so I know the place well.
Yeah, this guy was a grad student in Iowa.
Excellent. All right, now what? As far as you obviously deal with a lot of different countries. Are there countries that are easier to deal with than other countries? What are the easy countries? What countries pose more of a challenge?
Well, I mean, probably just in sheer volume and familiarity, we'd probably do the most out of China.
Okay.
But we've also do quite a bit out of Eastern Europe, like Poland, for instance. Like I said, we work with a number of food importers that bring stuff out of Eastern Europe.
Well, that would make sense being you in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago is one of the largest Polish populations outside of Warsaw, I believe it is.
Right.
So those countries, China isn't always easy, but it's something we're extremely well versed in for obvious reasons, just based on sheer volume.
Okay.
And like I said, the European countries are easy to work with, and they're very detail oriented. I wish everybody was like them. Some of the tougher countries, there are certain countries either in the Middle East or in Central Asia that we've had limited work with, but you can always count on it being a bit of a grind.
All right.
Getting the product in there, out of there.
Can you give any examples?
Pakistan.
Okay.
I have one importer that regularly brings things in from Pakistan, and we can always pretty much expect that's going to be an exam.
All right.
Just for a number of reasons, which I can't necessarily pinpoint for sure, but
right.
We can, obviously, given the political climate in the world, you can understand why.
And that's a good transition to my next question I wanted to ask you. I wanted to go back to security. How much security do you deal with? Because you are licensed by Homeland Security, and obviously we're in a post 9/11 world. So how much of a impact does that have on your job? I would have to say it has a significant impact. But what do you have to deal with each shipment that you clear that comes in?
Well, we're a member of the CTPAT, which
right.
is Customs and Trade Protection. And along with that comes a certain level of responsibility, which obviously as a broker you should have anyways, but something we try to take extra certain care of, that we work with partners that are also in the program. The responsibilities of a lot of the CTPAT issues really come on the movement and the security of the freight, which as a customs broker, as a pure customs broker, we're a bit removed from. We don't have agents in these origin countries that we're working with. That's more a freight forwarder's relationship. And, loading of containers overseas is a freight forwarder's issue. I mean, from our perspective, we do our best to work with partners that follow those protocols and are within the program. And we do our best to educate them when new information becomes available from CTPAT about certain changes or certain security measures they should be taking. But that program's been in place a number of years now, and the scrutiny of the movement of the freight, I think, is pretty good, and the partners that are in the program is pretty good. So when we're working with someone who is CTPAT compliant, we feel pretty good about it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if that's clear, but we don't generally just jump into working with just anybody. We try to work with freight forwarding agents and partners that are solid companies that respect that process and follow it.
Very, very good. Back to countries. I had one listener who repeatedly has asked me, do you have any difficulty dealing with Mexico?
I don't do a lot out of Mexico.
Okay.
But the limited times I have, a lot of that is border crossing work, typically, where it's coming up on trucks. And I must be honest, we don't do a lot with importers bringing things in from Mexico. There's obviously a ton of business done that way, obviously.
Yeah.
But I can't speak intelligently about having a lot of problems. My experiences haven't been bad.
Okay.
I mean, stuff crosses at Laredo. There's a pretty good process from what I can see. But like I said, my window to that is a little small, so I don't know if I'm the best one to tell you.
Okay.
On that.
Fair enough. So how is the industry as a whole? What do you see right now presently? Is there anything you can forecast for the future?
I think the industry's okay. I think there's definitely been some consolidation.
All right.
Now in Chicago, it's a good market. I think LA is probably obviously a bigger market, and New York is a bigger market. But also one thing that just to give you a little education, back in the day, if you will, early 2000s, if you were a Chicago-based broker, you could only really clear shipments in Chicago.
Right.
And since that time, they introduced the remote location filing, the RLF program. Or now I can sit here in Chicago and clear shipments coming into LA, New York, Dallas, wherever.
Yeah.
Provided the importer has what they call a continuous bond, which
So
most importers have.
When did the remote location filing come into place?
Well, we took it around about 2005, but I know it was obviously going before then.
Right.
But that's when it really started to take off. And that completely changed the landscape of the brokerage business. It became less provincial.
Yeah.
And so that's changed things a bit. And you also have, obviously they're huge companies. They've always been there and always will be, and they have their brokerage departments along with their forwarding. And then, there's a smaller market of brokers like ourselves that are independents, and we work with, like I said, importers as well as freight forwarder partners that don't have their own brokerage. I was recently in LA about a month ago, and that they have a lot of smaller operations out there, broker-only operations, and it's okay. It's not easy to become a broker, and it's even tougher to maintain being a broker. It's not something you can just throw a shingle on the door and go to work.
Yeah.
The exam to pass is extremely difficult. I've been an undergrad, I've been, got my MBA, and I still tell people that was probably the toughest test I took.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I was too removed from my college years or something, but it took twice to pass. But the pass rate on the exam is pretty low.
Okay.
They used to quote it around 20-25% pass rate, which there's a lot of reasons for that. I think a lot of people that take the test are doing the work for years, let's say as an entry writer, and they want to accelerate, move up to the next point. But I don't know. I used to say sometimes you got to see the forest for the trees, and I think if you're knee deep in it on a daily basis, it's kind of almost tougher to pass the exam than being someone who isn't. And
really?
It's tough to explain. I don't know if I'm really putting it eloquently, but I think sometimes you can get bogged down in the minutia of the day-to-day of doing this work, and that can be almost tougher on you when you go to take the exam. But
interesting.
It's just one man's observation.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you put that up because one of my previous guests was a educational company, and one of the things they put out there is a customs broker seminar class to pass the test.
Yeah,
so it's interesting. Pardon me?
There are a few of those companies out there. I know not as many. They're bigger, and I know in New York they're quite popular. And I haven't heard much in LA, but I know New York always had them. Yeah,
but it's interesting. 20 to 25% pass rate.
That's the number they used to throw around. I can't actually tell you what the more recent figures are, but I don't think it's anything through the roof.
Okay.
And you'll have people take it multiple times, obviously.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know though, because it's an important role, and I think it should be a tough test to pass.
Yeah, you don't want any person walking off the street and no.
Right.
It's important. It's not something to be taken lightly.
Exactly.
We take very seriously the fact we're regulated by the Department of Homeland Security, and we make sure to follow up necessary procedures, in terms of securities and that, and the way we do our job every day, because we don't want to have our license pulled. To be brutally honest, you want to do your job right, so you want to do right by your clients.
Yeah.
That's important.
Importantly, if we can go back to how we started, what does a customs broker do? Can we start from, all right, I am a freight forwarder, and I have a commodity coming in from China. Can you give us a step-by-step process of what happens?
Your client does when you say as a freight forwarder.
All right, so
you're moving it on behalf of a client.
Correct. So I contact you to clear the. I would contact you, correct?
Yeah, presuming that importer doesn't already have some relationship. Yes.
Okay. All right, and then what's the next step after that?
Well, one thing to note with ocean freight shipments. Another thing that's evolved over the past 5-7 years or so is that they have what they call an importer security filing. And that's a filing that's done on behalf of the importer by the broker, typically, prior to the shipment leaving origin. And failure to do so can result in a fine of up to $5,000.
Okay.
And what that does is that basically puts that shipment in customs system from, like I said, the point of origin. That has to be filed 24 hours before the vessel sails from the final foreign port to the United States. And that's in place for any shipments coming into a U.S. port.
Okay.
And the reason I distinguish that is that not a lot, but there's a decent volume of shipments that come into Canadian ports and then are railed into the States via Canadian rail. That would be from Vancouver, typically, or Montreal, and then move in on the CP, Canadian Pacific, or CN, Canadian National Rail lines, into the States. So those aren't required to have ISF filings. But anything entering this country, let's say into Long Beach on a boat, or Norfolk, Virginia, or Jacksonville, Florida, or Savannah, Georgia, requires that ISF filing before it leaves the final foreign port. One upside to that for us as brokers has been we get more early notification of shipments on, in the queue, so to speak. So so that freight forwarder, if you're Joe freight forwarder coming to me saying, hey, I got ABC company bringing in widgets from Taiwan, and it's sailing Friday. Well, today we'd want that ISF filed, so they would have to provide us certain information. It's called a 10+2 program. So the points that are required to be filed include the name of the shipper, the name of the manufacturer of the goods, the name of the place where the container is loaded, the name of the company, what they call the consolidator, responsible for loading that container, the name of the importing company here. If that company has a different consignee, like where the goods are going, that company's information. If there's a different ship-to address, then that importer, that information. And then we always need to know the commodities involved because we have to report the harmonized tariff numbers, at least the first 6 digits. A harmonized tariff number is 10 digits long.
Right.
And for the ISF filing, you're required to file tariff numbers through the first 6 digits. So you need a certain level of detail of what's in that shipment. And that's filed before, as I indicated, before that vessel leaves the last foreign port. So that's where our first point of contact usually comes. Now, if it's a new importer that we've never done business with before, any customs broker is required to get what they call a customs power of attorney form completed by that importing company. And that gives us the authority to clear the shipment on behalf of that importer. So that's whenever an importer is starting a relationship with a broker, that's question one, is we need a completed power of attorney. That's absolutely required.
Yeah.
Not somebody, it doesn't give me the right to go take your car or your house. I mean, there's a very limited scope. Customs power of attorney, it's a standard. Every broker has the same one, except filling in their name versus, as the broker record.
Right.
So that's the first point in the process, and then that ISF is filed.
Okay. All right. So then the widgets come to the port.
Yep.
All right, and then.
Now, at that point, when that boat is a few days out from Long Beach, for instance, that freight forwarding company is going to be giving us as the broker and the importer notice that the shipment is due to arrive, and they create what's called an arrival notice, which has the relevant information for the shipment, bill of lading numbers, piece counts, container number, where it's coming into. Now, a lot of times, like we're sitting in Chicago here, that boat comes into Long Beach, the shipment's going to move to Chicago and then clear here, not clear at L.A., at Long Beach. So they issue what's called an inbound number, and that allows the shipment to move within the United States without having cleared through customs. So they issue what's called an IT number, is what it's typically called.
Okay.
So that's part of the information that freight forwarder provides to us as the broker to clear on behalf of the importer.
So how does that?
At the time it hits the West Coast, let's say for a shipment that's going to clear in Chicago, we can file entry about the time it hits the West Coast. So
now, is there a security issue with the inbound?
Yeah, that's bonded cargo. Yes,
okay.
There's absolutely security, and that's on the freight forwarding companies to manage. But yes, that cargo is secured.
All right. So now,
when it's within the country.
All right. So the shipment gets here to Chicago. You physically inspect it when it gets here?
Not typically. No.
Okay. All right.
Customs can inspect whatever they want.
All right.
I would say, it's probably a low percentage, and it's all dependent on the type of commodity, the country of origin. And there's a number of factors that determine what they inspect. But those inspections, there's 2 types of inspections that are typically done. on ocean freight. The first one is called a Bacchus exam, which is essentially an X-ray of the container.
Okay.
That's most often done at the port where it comes off the boat.
Yeah.
At the port of entry. They have them right on the pier. They do exams there. Now, they could look at something in an X-ray exam like that where it scans the outside. It looks like an old, looks more or less like a phone. You know how the electric company works on the power lines. You know, the bucket trucks type thing. It's something similar. It looks like that, and they X-ray the outside of the container. And if they determine that they need to look at the contents further, they would move it to what they call a CES, a Customs Examination Station,
okay.
where it can be divanned and where customs officers will physically go through shipments. You know, if they're looking at this particular shipment, they will have it, pulled out of the container, segregated, and examine it for whatever reason they're looking at it. So that's done, like I said, in L.A. a lot of times there's a couple examination stations. Now, that whole process could be done in Chicago as well. It is done sometimes in Chicago.
Okay.
There's 2 customs examination stations in Chicago where that work can be done.
And where are they located?
They're both actually now in Bensonville.
All right.
Yeah. There's 2. There's Channel Distributing. That's where most of the X-ray exams are done, and intensive exams, what they call intensive exams, as well as Global CFS, which is also in Bensonville. They do a number of intensive exams.
For you people outside of Chicago, Bensonville is near O'Hare Airport.
Yeah,
Okay.
Basically a community, industrial park community, more or less, right?
Right.
Would be the best way to describe it.
All right. So now the widgets get here to Chicago. It's been examined by customs. What is your role to get those widgets to the company that's going to deliver them to their final endpoint?
Okay. Well, first of all, the goods are going to either come in. If someone has a full container of goods, they're going to come to a Chicago railhead.
All right.
For instance, if it's going to be a Chicago clearance, they're going to come to the railhead, and they will be cleared out of that point.
All right.
So every location has what they call a firms code, which is the identifier of where the final location is for clearance. So let's say we have a full container of widgets at the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Yard in Elwood, Illinois.
Yeah.
It has a firm code of H572. Okay, we would clear the shipment as part of our customs entry. We'd identify that the shipment is clearing out of the railhead there. When that's done, let's say that's done, everything's clean, it clears, and the freight is made available, then either if the client, the importer, needs us to handle it, we pull the container from the yard and deliver it wherever it needs to go, or in some cases our freight forwarder partners handle that themselves. That's part of their role. So that's really customer specific.
Okay.
Now, the other scenario is when shipment is what they call LCL cargo, less than container load. Now, that's what a lot of freight comes in as, because not everybody needs to bring in a container load of widgets at a time. They might bring in 3 pallets.
Right.
So they're part of what's called a consolidation, which is basically overseas. That shipping agent gathers up 10 guys' stuff that needs to go to Chicago and puts it in one container. And away it goes. Now, when that container gets to Chicago railhead, it's transferred to what they call a CFS, a customs freight station, or container freight station, excuse me.
Okay.
And that is where those goods are transferred to and where they would clear out of. So all the goods would go there. They would not be cleared until they get to that location and a customs entry is filed. So that container would move inbound, like what we call inbound, from the railhead to, let's say, St. George Warehouse in Wooddale, or Bar Freight in Bolingbrook. There's a number of CFS stations in the Chicago area.
Okay.
And obviously same in L.A., New York, all these other markets. So the freight would then clear out of there. And then, like I said, depending on the relationship with the importer, either we pick it up for them, people can pick it up themselves, a freight forwarding agent can arrange it, whatever. But it's cleared out of that location.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, John, I really can't thank you enough for joining us today. Once again, our guest is John Tracy from TOH International. John, what's the best way for people and companies to get a hold of you?
Well, unfortunately, in our world today, we talk less, and I think email is probably the best way to initially contact me. And my email address is J as in John, Tracy. That's J Tracy at T as in Tom, O as in Oscar, H as in Happy, I as in Ice, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom.com.
Okay, so that's jtracy@tohint.com, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. All right, finally, I asked this question of most of my guests. The term logistics is so widespread nowadays. You see it on side of rail cars. You see it at small storage facilities. What does the term logistics mean to you?
To me, the term logistics really, and maybe I'm looking through my prism here of the industry I'm in, I see it as everything involved in getting goods, commodities, what have you, from origin to destination, and in our case, from a foreign country to a U.S. entity here in America. And that involves not only freight forwarders, but it involves truckers, and obviously, most importantly, it involves customs brokers. So it's all necessary, all are essential to that process, and that's how I really view logistics.
All right.
I said maybe I'm a little slanted towards my own industry, but that's
no, that sounds like a great definition. Once again, John Tracy from TOH International. You can reach him at jtracy@tohint.com, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, John, for joining us. And
thank you for asking me.
Yeah, and we'll catch you next time on Logical Logistics. This is Joe Beck, your host, and thanks for listening.
Click the subscribe button for new videos every week and download us and review us on iTunes. Visit www.beslogistics.net for more logistics, transportation, and warehousing resources. Thanks for watching.